Today I am going to tell you how to drive people crazy with Deleuze and Guattari. I am looking forward to finally take the first steps towards a practical application. Honestly, it will remain complicated and quite theoretical, but hopefully also fun and creative. There are some who have drawn inspiration from Anti-Oedipus. However, the descriptions of the paralogisms are mostly ignored. But it is perhaps the most important part. But what is important about this topic? The paralogisms are manipulations of the desiring production. And as such I will also describe them here so that you can use them. Or, of course, that you can prevent them. With these manipulations Deleuze and Guattari show that the theory about the desiring production is alive and relevant. They use it in Anti-Oedipus to criticize psychoanalysis, at least the terrible kinds like Freud tells us about. I hope no one is offended, but I am serious. Just read The Wolf Man, it is such a brutal overcoding. So, the manipulations. We already talked about how the desiring production works. But if we understand how it is distorted, then we can explain the disasters in communication and react in a different way. Think about it like Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, but less giraffes and wolves and more machines and society. Deleuze and Guattari see the desiring production working in two ways. A legitimate and an illegitimate way. This means that in every interaction, desire production can go right or wrong. And yes, these are obviously judgments. For Deleuze and Guattari, desire is initially associative and should remain so. The desiring machines connect organs with flows and jump from one to the next and leave behind a trace of code on the body without organs. I think I need to explain my diagrams. The blue line describes the path of the desiring machines connecting organs in blue and pink with the streams in pure pink. The desiring machine forms the current existential territory in green. The whole coding takes place on the body without organs. These kinds of diagrams can be found also in other videos and in all my explanations. There are also diagrams for the disjunctive synthesis. Here, memory and imagination are blurred and undecided. The lines of code from the desiring production can be decoded and recoded in an altered way. At the end, a subject emerges from some existential territories and identifies with some coded points. But this subject is retroactive and nomadic, it does not control the previous machines. Okay, so much for the basics. Now for something a little more challenging. There are 5 ways to manipulate the 3 syntheses and their unconscious machines. These are, as promised, ways to drive people crazy. Or neurotic to be exact. When Deleuze and Guattari talk about madness, they tend to mean normal people with their idiosyncrasies. In a psychiatric ward, on the other hand, they would probably find many things normal. The first manipulation I want to tell you about is really easy. Just tell someone why they are doing something and what they really want. For example, you can tell them that they do not want to watch online videos, they actually want a hug. If your manipulation is successful, their desire shifts. I bet no one will accept this claim, just like that. But they may react in some form that will change their desiring production. Maybe they watch more video or less, or their reflection and interpretation change their perspective. The interpretation of the desire shifts or displaces it. Deleuze and Guattari describe above all the construction of an abstract desire that overcodes actual experience. This is what Freud often describes in his therapy reports. He just talks until the wolf in the dream is reinterpreted as a domestic dog to fit his theory. Even if that takes years. But outside of psychoanalysis, it is far less common. When you tell other people what they really want, it's probably not as general and theory-driven. But maybe it is, then you are doing what Deleuze and Guattari call extrapolation. You have to construct an abstract desire to overcode the actual experience. But you do not need a sophisticated theory. Even with some form of general explanation, it too can somewhat distort the current desire. The next manipulation is the double bind. But it is not really Guidry Bateson's double bind. It's a distortion of the second synthesis. Every time you use a model to interpret the disjunctive synthesis, it loses its openness. And if you now ask yourself if this includes the theory of desiring production from Anti-Oedipus, the answer is yes. Even Deleuze and Guattari produce a double bind with their theory. But if you take the ideas in Anti-Oedipus to the extreme and rewrite your model of the unconscious with every experience, you may distort your memory and imagination very little. And it is a long way from spontaneous models and flexible concepts in Anti-Oedipus to the overcoding that is common in psychology. Even the strict separation into conscious and unconscious is a double bind that limits experience to 2 categories. So, to drive people crazy with this, just use a lot of models that leave little room to question the model itself. The next manipulation is the application. And this one is tricky and not easy to implement for individuals. It refers primarily to the relationship between societal codes and the individual coding of desire. The cultural codes shape the individual production of desire, which then recognizes the codes again in society. This obscures the actual production of desire. To apply this manipulation you must, for example, lead a team. Here you could divide the employees into categories according to performance. When their self-concept changes and they accept your categories, you have succeeded in part in one form of this manipulation. The last manipulation Deleuze and Guattari mention is called afterward. This refers to a model or a theory applied to the desiring production. If someone uses the theory to explain their behavior and you get them to twist cause and effect, then you have been successful in this manipulation. Deleuze and Guattari talk of course about Freud, who put the family system over the unconscious. And if his patients then interpret their previous behavior in terms of the Oedipus complex, they are retroactively changing their perception. Processes of individual, cultural, and historical coding are confounded, and current coding is seen as a cause rather than an effect. This happens every day. For example, if a group is not praised enough and they get bad self-esteem as a result, then the bad self-esteem can be reinterpreted as a cause for the lack of praise, even though it is an effect. This is very simple, and anyone can do it. Congratulations to everyone who has made it this far. You are now at the point where you possibly surpass even Deleuze and Guattari in understanding the nuances of desire production. They never wrote about it again in this detail and probably forgot parts of their own theory after Anti-Oedipus was finished. And that probably means that with this understanding you belong to a small and very special group. So, tell me, how does this feel? If you feel something, it is maybe the manipulation that distorts the third synthesis of the unconscious. Through such exaggerated praise, the nomadic and polyvoc production in the second synthesis can be overcoded, and the experience shifts towards segregative and narcissistic qualities. If you can evoke that kind of subjectivity in others, you know one more way to drive people crazy with Deleuze and Guattari. But also every way to limit the second synthesis in their openness for imagining and dreaming is a way to drive people crazy. Especially with theories and models that leave no room for alternatives and deviations, you create an exclusive and limited imagination, instead of an inclusive and open thinking. And then there is the most basic distortion of desiring production, which reduces the associative drive and flexibility of desiring production. The crazy ones that come out of this manipulations are stuck in their habits and limited in their imagination. Moreover, their subjects are more narcissistic and narrow-minded than usual. So, of course, my advice is not only not to use this manipulations. It is a matter of being more attentive to the subtleties of communication and the dynamics of subjectivity, so that we may soon find ourselves in a world that is a little more Deleuzian and Guattarian. It would also mean that we all become a little less crazy. Or a little more, depending on the definition. Thanks for watching. Feel free to write me in the comments what stuck from this video. And with this understanding of the distortions of the desiring production, we can start to apply these to daily topics. You can even suggest situations in the comments. I tried to come up with an explanation in terms of Deleuze and Guattari.